Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining, Professor. It's a pleasure having you on.
Nice meeting you, Kennedy, and I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. I'd love if you could start off with an introduction, maybe your educational background and where everything has gotten you to where you are today.
Yes, so Kennedy, I have a Bachelor of Science in Economics from the business school at the University of Florida. And after that, I went to get my PhD from the Marshall School of Business at the University of Southern California. And so my PhD is technically in business administration with a specialization in organizational behavior.
Very cool. What kind of got you in that specific realm as previously you started as an econ major?
Yeah, so that was an interesting transition. So I really enjoyed studying economics as an undergraduate student. And while I was in the undergraduate program, I got an internship with the Senate. And so I moved to Washington, D.C., and I'm doing this internship with this committee called the Joint Economic Committee, which the senator in charge of that committee was Connie Mack, who was a Florida senator at the time. And as I was in DC working on this committee, I realized that I was interested in the work of that committee, but I became even more interested in the interactions of the people in the office, the people who were overseeing me, my own supervisors, and the dynamics were not always, how do I say this, but they were not always healthy and productive dynamics. And I just thought, wow, this could be managed so much better. And that's what piqued my interest in management, was actually, I guess, having kind of less than ideal experiences being managed by others. So I went back to University of Florida once I finished the internship, and I requested to add a double major in management. University of Florida did not want to keep students around any longer than they had to. So they denied my request for a double major, but I was able to transition from being an undergraduate econ student to a PhD student in management rather easily.
Very cool. And that's awesome that that is what changed your journey. And it's obvious how much of a strong leader you are that you were willing to move and start a new path. As it is your niche, what would you define a strong leader as?
Okay, so that's a good question, Kennedy. I'm going to answer the question a little bit differently by saying whenever I began teaching my leadership classes, to me there are three critical foundations that make somebody a good leader in an organization. Number one, you need to be emotionally intelligent. And so this means having competencies, understanding and managing the emotions of others, and also understanding and managing your own emotions and how you express yourself to others. Number two, you need to be able to manage perceptions of fairness. And so in the workplace, we find that fairness is a great motivator or a demotivator. So if people feel that they're treated fairly by their supervisor, their manager, they're willing to go the extra mile. But fairness is always in the eye of the beholder. So the tricky part is that managers may not realize if employees feel that they're treated unfairly. So, so I can say as a manager, you need to be concerned about managing employee perceptions of fairness. It's a lot more difficult to do than it sounds. Mm-hmm. And the third and final point, and one that I've been spending a lot of time on in my career, is that leaders need to build and maintain the trust of the people that they oversee. And again, that's really easy to say, but it's very challenging to do over time because you can violate people's trust and not realize it. You can violate people's trust and it can be very difficult to repair depending on what the issue was. But those are the three things that I think are fundamental: being emotionally intelligent, managing perceptions of fairness, and building and maintaining trust.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those. And I feel like that loyalty goes so far, even with companies, displaying their loyalty truly has people aspiring to believe them as a leader. And then as you've been awarded for your leadership and your research, why do you think research is essential and how do you think you can conduct strong research?
Okay, so why is research essential? I mean, in any field of study, and organizational behavior is no different. All of the knowledge that we accumulate and that we are able to share in classrooms and in publications such as Financial Times or Wall Street Journal, or any publications such as those, all of those insights are based on academic scholarship or based on research. And although organizational behavior is a newer field compared to others such as psychology or economics, as a field, we've still been around since about the 1950s, I guess you would say. So we have a huge body of scholarship that we use to draw from to teach in the classroom. And that scholarship is always evolving. And so we can't really finish per se, because organizations are always changing and evolving. And as they get more complex, or just the nature of those contexts change, all of a sudden new topics become relevant. For example, when I was in the doctoral program, which was a little while ago at this point, people had just started telecommuting, because that's when people first had dial-up internet access via the phone lines, and it enabled them to start working from home. Because that was a new work form, and people were very skeptical about allowing their employees to telecommute, and employees were concerned about becoming professionally isolated if they telecommuted, that was an important area of study back then. Now, a lot of that's shifted, and new areas of study now are around things like artificial intelligence.
Yep.
How are people reacting to working with robots? Things of this nature. So there are always new things that organizations are doing, and research is here to understand what the implications of these contextual changes are, so that we can talk about it in the classroom and elsewhere.
Very fascinating. Yeah, it's crazy to think how much everything has changed, even a few years ago, COVID and the pandemic, and like adjusting to that and being a leader during that can be a struggle. I was wondering additionally how, as you've been awarded, how you conduct strong research with good evidence and provings.
Yeah. So Kennedy, again, it can be very challenging to
Yeah.
do. So there's different ways that organizational behavior professors conduct research, and I've done a little bit of all of it. We can, similar to some of our colleagues in the psychology department, we can conduct experiments. So we can conduct laboratory type of experiments. And I've done quite a bit of that. Experiments are good to determine causality. You can rule out a lot of things. For example, I've studied how do people react to their trust being violated? And then if somebody responds by apologizing or denying or offering a different type of apology, like, does that repair trust more versus less? Those types of questions were really great to explore in a lab, because it's hard to find like those incidents where trust is going to be violated. What am I going to do? Follow somebody around and see if they violate somebody else's trust? You can't really do that. So you go and you explore it in a lab. Whereas I also conduct research on humor in organizations. I've done quite a lot of research on leader humor. And the way that humor manifests and its effects in long-term relationships, that naturally, a lot of those questions should be explored in the field. And when I say in the field, that means that we approach people who are working in organizations, usually managers and their employees, and we have them answer questions about each other, right? And so the employees will say, rate their manager's level of humor or the type of humor that they use. And then the supervisor can rate employee performance and different things like that. They can both rate the quality of the relationship, and we match up all of their responses and run analyses. So that's what we say. That's a field research approach. And then there are other things that you can do as well, such as conduct interviews. You can also do others fancy statistical techniques that we call meta-analysis, which summarizes a bunch of studies. But I would say that lab experiments and field studies would be two of the primary ways that organizational behavior professors conduct research.
Very fascinating. That's so cool and crazy that you guys are able to bring those surveys and stuff like that and research to a conclusion and find out so much stuff that you're teaching so many students. Aside from amazing professors like you, why would you say UMiami's curriculum differs from other universities?
Oh gosh, we have really great curriculum for our undergraduate students and our master's level students. We even have a PhD program as well. So I guess I'll talk about each of those. You know, our undergraduate program has been going up and up in the rankings in the last 15 years. I mean, I feel so proud to be part of this brand, if you will, because, you know, we've just been getting so many more accolades, and I think that they're well deserved. I mean, what goes on in our classrooms here at University of Miami, we have great faculty, we have small class sizes, which I think is really unique. You know, there are a lot of universities, kind of the larger public universities, where you can be in a class of 300 students, or you can be in a class of 1,000 students and you're watching your professor on television. I did that myself when I attended the University of Florida. I got a great education at the University of Florida, but it's very different than what students experience here at the University of Miami with our, at least in the business school, very small class sizes. At the master's level, again, the class sizes are very small. We also have a ton of specialized master's programs. So it's not just about getting your MBA these days, like the master's in business administration, which I think is what everybody used to think about when they thought about getting a master's. Now we also have a master's in leadership, you know, a master's in supply chain management, a master's in international business, a master's in finance, a master's in accounting, and there's others as well. So our masters can cater to a lot more specific interests these days if people want to go that extra mile. And so I think that those are two ways in which our students here at University of Miami really benefit.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, yeah, definitely those niches go a lot longer, and like you are more specific on what you want to do, and finding those in the master program is obviously super beneficial.
Mhm.
My final question for you is there any resources such as websites or books you would recommend to people wanting to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Kenny, I mean, first of all, if people are interested in the field of management as a major or continuing with that field of study, you know, I would encourage them to kind of do what you do, like reach out to a management professor and talk to them about that, because, you know, we are here because we like to help and mentor students in our field. And I think that students would find, you know, professors to be very receptive, to have conversations with them. Beyond that, you can pick up, you know, organizational behavior textbooks. I have my own textbook published through Flat World, and so they could look up my textbook. There's a lot of other really good textbooks out there. So just looking up any organizational behavior textbook, and you can flip through it and get an idea of the types of topics that are in our domain. Things like employee motivation, leadership, as you mentioned a number of times, organizational culture, lots of different topics like that, team dynamics, which are really interesting. Beyond that, I would encourage students to pick up Harvard Business Review and read it, and maybe also MIT Sloan Management Review. I recommend those two publications because they're written for a general audience. They're not written for academics. They're written for people out there working and managing others, but they're based on kind of rigorous research that academics have conducted, right? And so it's good, valid information, but written in a way that's interesting and catchy and easy to digest. So those would be my recommendations.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing, Professor, and I really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Nice meeting you, Kennedy.
Nice to meet you. Thank you. Bye.
Okay.